Hi, my name is Naomi, and I am the development coordinator with the Warrior Connection. Now, the global pandemic took the world by shock, and the shutdown took the world by shock. The nonprofit world wasn't exempt, including the Warrior Connection. For an organization that hosts in person holistic retreats for veterans and military spouses, you can imagine the chaos of all the questions that the leadership of TWC asked about how to proceed with 2020. Questions like, how do we reach veterans and military spouses over a virtual space? Can we transcend our connection that we make in person into a virtual space? And how do we connect with our program alumni and graduates? And they're all over the country. How do we make that happen? Now, at the time of this recording, some places were slowly starting to open back up, but the Delta variant is at its peak. So we're looking into the future as there still are many unknowns. But we had the opportunity to sit down and talk with our executive director, Erin Phillips, to discuss what that looks like, what 2020 looked like, what we learned from it, and how we're going to approach 2021 and 2022 moving forward. So, Erin, let's take it back to the beginning of last year. It's 2020. You have your strategic annual plans in place. Retreats are scheduled. Everything's rolling. March happens. The world shuts down due to coronavirus. What were your initial concerns about how TWC would move forward?
I think really it was probably threefold. The first part, obviously, as the pandemic began to set in early March, the organization was working on specific goals to start 2020 that was really focused on building our strategic leadership and building our board of directors. That was our primary focus come into February into March. And so early in March, as the pandemic started and things began to shut down and schools began to close, obviously, like most of the rest of us, we really weren't sure how serious is this going to get, how much of the closures will continue, how long will they be? And so, much like the rest of America and the world, it was really an unknown. So rather than stay the course as is, and typically we would have kicked off our programmatic year, our retreats, in or around April, May. As we got to the end of March, it really became clear that that would not be prudent for a variety of health concerns. And so as an organization, specifically the leadership structure of the organization, we elected to really triple down on our strategic leadership recruitment efforts, specifically through our board of directors and board of advisors. So, and we weren't sure how that was going to be received as well, whether or not folks would be open to getting involved in an agency with all that was going on in the world. So that's really where we were. As it got close to the end of March, like I say, we elected to not move forward with opening our programmatic year, and instead, at least at that time, had the idea that we would begin again potentially in the end of summer. So come July or maybe even August, giving the pandemic, at least the virus, some time to assess what would be reasonable and what would be prudent as far as exposure goes to our staff, but also our participants that would be traveling.
It sounds like you guys really spent that time well by paving a stronger foundation for post shutdown. With all the changes that had to be made, it can be very easy to lose focus and determine what to do first. So, how did TWC continue to put the mission first and veteran focused above all else?
Refocusing our goals with our board of directors was number one, really recruiting, retaining, and attracting new visionary leaders to our board remained our number one focus, as retreats were not going to be our focus for Q1 and Q2. Likewise, we really reassessed what could we do as far as supporting veterans and military families during this pandemic, and how would this impact those, the target demographic that we serve. And that was really a bit of an unknown. So we elected, our program director and I really wanted to focus on those participants that have graduated from our program. The word connection is literally in our name. So we thought, listen, let's at least go back to those that are graduates of our program, alumni of our program. Let's double down and remain connected with them. What do they need? How are they feeling despite all that's going on? And that was really our secondary pivot.
Now, the shutdown was stressful and anxiety inducing for most people, let alone those that are currently struggling with PTS, anxiety, or depression. Did you see this reflected in some of your program graduates?
Well, I think first and foremost, the challenge was, hey, how do we get the message out to our existing graduates and alumni? What does that support system look like? What do they need now? And how can we serve in that way? And so, what we know to be true about mental health in general is really measured by your social connections. And so, as the world shut down and social distancing became the buzzword, it was really about the physical distancing that hurt so many of our graduates. The systems and processes that are already in place through the VA, through vet centers, through other nonprofits and for-profit companies just like us, it was the physical connection that was severed that was so tough to replace. So we pivoted to an online platform. We pivoted to virtual connections just like this, and really tried to recreate some of the experiential components, but mostly just looking to reconnect with our folks and our families. And we very quickly learned that the main thing that they wanted, the main thing that they were craving was indeed those intimate connections, those emotional connections with other people and organizations like ours that they knew had an emotional investment in their success. So as we began our virtual retreat content, we really thought through it in three ways. And number one was how can we reconnect and reignite those emotional connections with our graduates? Number two, how can we reach those that were on our wait list, folks that were wanting to come to our program? And then really number three, how could we continue to cultivate relationships with military families that may not know about us? So we used our virtual platform in those three ways to continue the connection with those that we already know, to touch base with those that inquired about our programming and invite them in a virtual setting, and then also to attract new military families that may or may not know about us yet.
Breaking isolation and getting veterans and spouses connected with each other is one of the main and most powerful modalities that TWC instills. And with the shutdown comes isolation. What are your thoughts on the challenges that our veterans and military families face during COVID on top of everything else?
That's a very broad question, frankly. And I'm not quite sure I have the answer for it per se, but here's what we know. PTSD, military depression, anxiety, military sexual trauma, those things can happen to anyone in this community. And by and large, PTS, depression, anxiety are pretty broad across our society in America. And those are not signs of weaknesses. In fact, some factors specifically increase the chances that someone can develop PTSD, the disorder where it recreates those traumatic events as if they're happening again. And many of those circumstances aren't under our control. So having a very intense, long-lasting traumatic event, specifically through the way the media handled some things, created an environment which made things worse, exacerbated the anxiety, that worry about future, that exacerbated depression, the damage and past experiences that helped recreate. And of course, PTSD is of course more common in certain types of trauma, specifically folks that have experienced combat or sexual assault. So all those personal factors, along with the pandemic exposure, age, gender, all of those things played a role. I don't think there's one thing specifically that our program could do that was most helpful, other than, again, bringing back that social and emotional connection to a group of folks, specifically through our alumni and our graduates. They trust us. They know that we have their best intentions and best outcomes in mind. So they were open and working with us to figure out how to make the virtual platform a success. And, quite frankly, it still lacks that connection, that secret ingredient that really you can only get when you experience the energy of a group in a room, as we recreate in our program. So I think we did the best we could with what we have. And as the pandemic is continuing now, and with this Delta variant increasing and looking like many states and communities are again beginning to retract their physical and social distancing protocols. We're just continuing to re-engage to make more social support available, and hopefully we'll continue our online programs and our virtual activity. If anything, it's allowed us to just kind of reinvent our follow-up content. Now the virtual space will definitely be something that is a part of all of our retreat follow-up as graduates leave our program, specifically in the 6 to 12 months post-graduation.
That's really great to hear that you guys were able to make that pivot because of the relationships and the trust that were built previously at your in-person retreats. And over the course of 2020 and in the beginning of 2021, did you notice an uptake or a decrease in veterans and military spouses inquiring about TWC's retreats?
I would say by and large, yes. I mean, we can just look at the numbers and you can see requests for mental health services skyrocketing in 2020. Overdoses from either prescription or illegal substances up some 30%. Alcohol consumption up some 400% during the pandemic. Domestic violence and violent crime up some 30% across the country, specifically in large metropolitan areas. So I would say by and large, yes, there's more need for services like ours. And in a virtual setting, it's not our best. We're best when we're able to be physically present with those that we serve, our military men and women and military spouses.
Going virtual is really difficult to do when you're trying to connect over a computer screen, as most of us know. Now, during this transition, was there anything that TWC tried that maybe didn't work out too well that you learned from the situation?
I mean, of course, anytime you try something new, you go into it with an expectation of what you think you'll find versus what you actually find, versus how the other person perceives it. So for us, I mean, all those things were true. Yes. So we thought that initially it may be challenging to reconnect with our graduates and our alumni in a virtual space. And, honestly, for some, it was a challenge. Not everybody is adept at technology. Not everybody has access to bandwidth that will allow for great video quality. And some people just frankly aren't comfortable, even though they may have access and may have the wherewithal. They don't want to. They want to keep staying off the grid. They prefer to be in person. So I think all those things were true at different layers. And at the same time, we found many folks that we thought would be resistant that said, no, I'll be there. I'll be there every month. I'll see you next month, right? And so some of the other lessons we learned was, how could we structure these virtual settings such that it's as good as we could make it to be an in-person experiential and emotional connection. So we tried different things. We included a psychoeducational component into our online content. We included an experiential component. We continued to use mindfulness, heart math techniques and technology to try to recreate those connections as best we can, albeit on a virtual platform.
I have to say, I really commend the creative workarounds that were made to continue to serve veterans and their families as best as you could over the past year. Like that's a difficult problem to navigate. Now, with vaccines in place, you've recently resumed in-person events. What changes have you all made in light of the health directives?
Well, I'll tell you, we had to pay special attention to our retreat safety protocols. How do we enroll a potential participant? First and foremost, how do we protect our staff and volunteers, right? So we had to be very specific in what we would do and not do, what we would require from our staff and volunteers, especially once the vaccines were released and and safety protocols could get us to a place where possibly conducting in-person retreats were an opportunity for us again. I think we're still figuring that out. We've hosted 3 in-person programs now since the fall of 2020. And I'll say, we're just as much lucky as we are good. Our safety protocols follow CDC guidance verbatim. And so we're hopeful we can continue to do that despite this Delta variant and its reemergence in our communities. So I think, like I said, we'll continue to follow our safety protocols as best we can and do our best that protects both our staff and volunteers as well as our participants.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I really appreciate the work that yourself, TWC's leadership teams, the staff, the volunteers have all put in to continue to reach out and let veterans know that they are not alone. And one last question before we wrap up. What is the biggest lesson you learned from 2020 that you'd like to share?
I don't know if there is a magic bullet, if there's a magic wand that we learn something super specific, other than really reinforcing, Naomi, what we already know to be true, and that is social connection is vital for the mental health and mental well-being of others. I would say, along with that, it probably served to just reinforce our 6 pillars of well-being. That's physical well-being, mental well-being, relationships, career, finances, and spirituality. All of those things are still just as important. So I think doubling down on the things that we already know to be most important and looking for ways to reinforce those lessons and the things that we coach to during the course of our retreat that our participants develop their action plan for as a part of completing our program, going back to those same folks, those alumni, those graduates, and reassessing where are they now with those goals since they left our program. And maybe they've made significant progress in the number 1 or number 2 area of most concern in their life. And then now, hey, let's reassess. What about priority number 3? What about priority number 4? What about changing the order of those priorities, given what's changed in your life since the pandemic? Those are probably the biggest lessons that we've learned.
That is awesome. And I think many of us really did take this past year to reassess, not only in the work that we may be doing, but also within ourselves. And it was a really good time to do that. So that is great to hear. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with before we sign off?
I think by and large, the most important things for us as an organization are to continue to build community, both internally and externally, reinforcing the relationships with our staff, with our volunteers, with our board of directors, with our graduates, with folks that have been previous donors, current donors, and alike, letting them continue to know how we're serving our target demographic. There are many great causes out there, just like the Warrior Connection. And so investing in the well-being of others just continues to be our focus and the focus of those that support the organization.
Thank you all for tuning in and learning about what TWC did in 2020 and the beginning part of 2021 to handle the challenges that were presented to them and that were presented to all of us during the COVID-19 pandemic and the global shutdown. And as you can tell, that there are big plans in the works to take the mission of TWC even further. However, and truly, honestly, it's not possible without any of our supporters. And it's because of the generosity of you that we're able to serve veterans and military spouses free of charge. That's a big deal with everything that they're dealing with. And we're talking flight, we're talking food, lodging, and creating a safe space for them to come and be authentically themselves and find themselves again, because it is very easy to get lost in the turmoil of PTS. And if you're a veteran or a military spouse, just know that you're not alone. You have a whole family here at the Warrior Connection that understands the struggle that you're going through and that want to be here for you. If you would like to attend a TWC retreat, please check us out at this link. If you are a veteran in crisis and need someone to talk to, available 24 hours, 100% confidential, please call the Veteran Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255. And lastly, if you would like to be a part of our mission, all donations help make our retreats possible. And you can donate here. And always a reminder, the mission is over, but the inner journey continues, and there's no shame in that.